Now, I'm going to start this afternoon with a quote from my personal hero, President Ronald Reagan, that I think succinctly summarizes what I'll be talking about this afternoon. Quote, "We who live in free markets believe that growth, prosperity, and ultimately human fulfillment are created from the bottom up, not the government down. Only when the human spirit is allowed to invent and create, only when individuals are given a personal stake in deciding economic policies and benefiting from their success, only then can societies remain economically alive, dynamic, progressive, and free." Now, given GOPAC's commitment to unite voters around a vision of creating opportunity for every American and making government more effective, it's my hope that President Reagan's words in my talk this afternoon will help communicate to you or to your constituents what I sincerely believe are the immeasurable benefits of our free enterprise system and the grave threat that big government poses to their liberty, their freedom to succeed, and our future as a free people. Now, as David mentioned, I'm Andy Puzder, CEO of CKE Restaurants, which you'll know as Carl's Jr. or Hardee's. By training, I'm an attorney who became a CEO about 15 years ago because our company was failing and heading towards bankruptcy. And thanks to a team effort and an entrepreneurial approach, we're doing very well today. Although I'm a CEO and an attorney, I didn't grow up rich. I grew up in a working class family from Cleveland, Ohio. My first job where I got a paycheck was scooping ice cream at Baskin-Robbins. That's for about $1 an hour, the then prevailing minimum wage. I worked my way through college and law school without government or family assistance by painting houses, cutting lawns, and busting up concrete with a jackhammer in St. Louis in the middle of summer. And anybody out there from Missouri will know how miserable that was. I worked all sorts of jobs. I was always grateful to have the work and never felt that any of this work was below me. But I grew up in a different time with different attitudes. I was a kid in the 50s and the 60s and was always taught that I could be whatever I wanted to be if I was willing to do the work. I was never told that other people had more than they deserved or that we had less than we deserved. My dad supported our family of 5 as a Ford car salesman. When I was about 10, that's around 1960, I went with him to deliver a car to a very wealthy individual in a very wealthy area near us. It was kind of a Downton Abbey wealthy area. It's called Hunting Valley, Ohio. We pulled through the ornate gate and I saw this huge, beautiful house that really dwarfed that little ranch house that the 5 of us lived in. And as my dad drove past it, I asked him why he didn't stop. Well, he said it was the guest house. Then we drove by these imposing stables, and they were more impressive than the little ranch house we lived in. Finally, we pulled up to the main gate, main house, which just stunned me. And we walked up to the entrance, and Mr. Humphrey, the owner, actually came to the door himself, took the keys, thanked my dad, and gave my dad the keys to his trade-in. Now, I was dumbfounded by the incredible wealth around me, and as we walked back to the car, I asked my dad what Mr. Humphrey did for a living. My dad said he's a lawyer and he runs a business. Now, I can still remember thinking, a lawyer? I could be a lawyer. So I looked up at my dad and asked, what's a lawyer? But the notion that it mattered what percent we were in or that Mr. Humphrey had so much wealth when we had so little never even occurred to me. What occurred to me was I could do that. Now, there's never been a nation where a working class kid like me could aspire to that level of success with any realistic chance of achieving it. And I want to talk to you about why I felt that way, why this belief is so important, and the depth of the tragedy that would ensue should we lose that attitude. So let's start with what brought about the biggest material change to the human condition in history, Adam Smith's free market capitalism. Now, this will be a very general overview and will have the problems that come with generalities, but I want to set the context for understanding the incredible positive power of free markets and individual liberty, as well as the destructive nature of consolidating power in the hands of a few individuals through the oppressive force of government. Now, prior to the 18th century, economic power was essentially vested in the landed aristocracy or urban patricians who controlled the government. Concepts of liberty and freedom were intended to protect their privileges against the increasing power of absolute monarchs. Those with power maintained a level of freedom for themselves while subjugating the majority of the population, if necessary, by force. Generally, these systems were based on military conquest. You won the war, parceled out the land to your supporters, who ruled as aristocrats, with little or no concern for the masses. Aristocrats owned the land. The land produced wealth. There simply weren't enough jobs for everyone, and people generally either found a trade, like blacksmiths, joined the military, joined a religious order, worked the land as serfs, or just starved. Now, as oppressive as this was, the economic systems of the day simply were incapable of feeding everybody, much less allowing people to improve their lives or even imagine a better future for themselves or their children. Then came capitalism. Artisan shops, which had previously catered to the privileged class, became factories catering to the masses, many of whom were now employed in those very factories. Capitalism and the Industrial Revolution are often criticized for mass production. But it's important to keep in mind that it was mass production for all rather than limited production for the wealthy. Consumers, not ruling aristocrats, would make decisions through their collective purchasing power and would guide the economy, determining whether one business succeeded and another failed. The serving class, the peasant class, became the consumer class. And those who ran the economic engines now became subject to the desires of that greatly expanded consumer class. Henry Ford didn't make cars for royalty. He made the Model T for the common man and woman. Over a century later, Steve Jobs didn't make iPhones for aristocrats. He made them for the masses. He made them for us. Rather than impoverished masses catering solely to a ruling elite, the ruling elite were now concerned with finding the best way to please the masses. Over time, the slaves and serfs disappeared. They became patrons, buyers, consumers, who in an economic form of democracy voted with every dollar they spent, no longer restrained by the whims of an aristocratic hierarchy that believed it was entitled to rule due to its superior intellect and birth. Now, by allowing the human spirit to invent and create, giving people a personal stake in deciding economic policies and benefiting from their success, capitalism encouraged innovation across a broad spectrum of society, with people from every walk of life striving to come up with the next great idea, the next great product or service consumers couldn't live without. It also increased productivity, making work pay, and vastly increasing the number and value of jobs. Adam Smith's invisible hand was lifting more people from poverty to prosperity than the oppressive fist of government ever had. In the United States, the release of this dynamic entrepreneurial energy resulted in the most innovative society the world has ever seen, creating more wealth and spreading it across broader demographics than any nation ever had. In 1776, just think about it, 13 colonies rebelled against the ruling aristocracy because of government economic repression. By 1885, that's within a mere 110 years, these backward colonies became the world's largest economy. Now think about the difference this created for the common man or woman. My grandfather grew up impoverished in the Austro-Hungarian Empire just before World War I, where a ruling class of aristocrats still controlled all economic benefits, where consumers' desires were irrelevant, if not disdained, and where the opportunity to improve your position was non-existent. His future held little opportunity to be anything other than a peasant, lucky to eke out a living as a serf, beholden to a landed aristocrat. Now, as a teenager, he left. He came to America. He died having fulfilled his dream of owning his own home and having 2 children with high school educations. Now, those were small dreams by today's standards, but they were huge dreams at the time. His grandson, me, who started his career scooping ice cream for minimum wage at Baskin-Robbins, saw no barriers to his dreams and became a lawyer who now runs an international corporation. But for the economic opportunities of our free enterprise system, which drew my grandfather like a magnet to leave his home and his family for a better life while still a teenager, I'd probably be a bald and toothless farmer sitting on a porch in Slovakia rather than a CEO addressing you this afternoon. Now, there's never been a nation or an economic system that offered millions of people like my grandfather the opportunity to make a better life for themselves and their families. that opened the door to success based solely on the commitment to give an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, or where success was determined not by your birth, but rather by your desire to work harder, longer, or smarter than the next guy. Now, another person that took advantage of this opportunity and to whom I owe a great debt was our company's founder, my friend, my former client, Carl Karcher. He was a bread truck driver, also from Ohio, with an 8th grade education and a belief in the American dream. In 1941, he and his wife, Margaret, borrowed $315, bought a hot dog cart, and started a business on a street corner in South Central Los Angeles. That $315 investment's grown into CKE Restaurants. CKE stands for Carl Karcher Enterprises. The international corporation has been my privilege to lead for the past 16 years. With a system that employs today close to 100,000 people worldwide and generated over $4 billion in system-wide sales last year and nearly 3,700 Carl's Jr.'s and Hardee's. Quick service restaurants that exist in 44 states and 38 foreign countries. Countries as diverse as Russia, China, Japan, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Brazil, Mexico, Kazakhstan, India, Egypt, Iraq, Australia, New Zealand, Denmark, and Turkey. And this year we'll open in Chile and Cambodia. All from a $315 investment in a hot dog cart and a belief that in America, if you had the will to succeed, you'd have the opportunity.